Live. Preparing to live stream. Still preparing. You just never know how long these things are going to take sometimes.
Not yet, huh?
No, this one's being particularly slow. Still not live yet. Unable to live stream. Well, let me try again then. Hold on.
Okay.
That's weird. I haven't had that problem before. Right. Well, no, now it says it's being live streamed, so I think we're live streamed.
Oh, okay.
Yep, got confirmation we're live.
Great. Okay. Very good. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Environment Subcommittee. One change to the agenda that was sent out. We are not going to take up SB 148, which we just heard this afternoon, or its cross-file, HB 449. We'll take those up at our next meeting. But with that, so the agenda is we'll start with what's that?
Delegate Foley needs to mute.
Say again, I'm sorry.
I think Delegate Foley is not on mute. She's not on mute, so I don't think she's asking a question.
Yeah.
Delegate
Page.
Delegate Foley, do you have a question?
Could you get on mute?
Okay, all right. So
she's on twice. I don't know why, but I muted her.
Okay. All right. So we're going to start with House Bill 130 and SB 258. Kristen, remind me, I think like earlier in session, we reviewed House Bill 130 at the time. Why don't, since it's been a little while, would you mind putting it on the screen and reviewing it?
You want the bill on the screen?
Sure.
Oh, hold on then.
And then Lisa and David, feel free to chime in. Okay. Thank you, Kristen.
So the bill so we have both House Bill 130 and Senate Bill 258, which are identical. And the bills are the DGS departmental bill codifying and implementing provisions under an executive order where it would require that the state reduce energy consumption in state-owned buildings by 20% by 2031 compared with the fiscal 2018 baseline. It's also codifying other requirements. Let me get to that list. So it would require an increase or a revision of the high performance green building program to align it with state climate goals. It directs DGS to expand the energy performance contracting program. DGS must provide oversight on progress, conduct an annual audit, maintain data and reporting through a comprehensive utility records management database, and directs all units of state government to implement projects and initiatives to conserve energy and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay. And Lisa and David, anything you want to add to Kristen's description?
Thank you. That was a pretty quick and good summary.
Okay. And again, just codifying the executive order, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Delegate Foley?
Okay, just to be clear here, this is just for buildings and facilities, right? This is not, that's all that this is, right?
It applies to state buildings.
Well, I know, but it's buildings and facilities. It's not equipment or vehicles or anything like that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Delegate Ruth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this may have been said, but I missed it. If so, is the Senate bill and the House bill in the same posture?
Yes, they are.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions about these bills? Does anyone, I mean, well, as was just pointed out, they are identical. We'll take them one at a time, though. Would someone like to make a motion on House Bill 130?
Move House Bill 130.
Second.
And, okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you. Anyone opposed? Okay, bill passes. SB 258, is there a motion in favor?
Move SB 258.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All right, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
All right, bill passes. Thank you. Now let's move on to House Bill 1509. Where I'm the sponsor, Baltimore Regional Water Governance Model Work Group. There have been some amendments since I presented the bill a couple of weeks ago. So, Kristen, would you mind presenting the amendments? And maybe if you could, yeah, great. I was going to say, could you bring it up? And
Yes.
there it is.
Yes, it is. This bill is establishing the Baltimore Regional Water Governance Model Work Group. There are amendments to specify of the 5 members that are appointed by the mayor of Baltimore City would include one who represents the current workforce responsible for the operation and maintenance of the water distribution system, and one member would be from a labor organization that is the exclusive representative for Baltimore City employees. Under the bill, the work group has to establish or develop a report. Let me go down to the amendment. Well, I guess, did you want to look at all the tasks of the work group? Were they
Sure, if you want to just quickly go over them, sure.
So they would review the report of the Baltimore Regional Water Governance Task Force that was submitted in accordance to previous law. They would have to analyze issues relevant to implementing a regional water governance model in the Baltimore region. Analyze whether creating a city-county rate board is necessary to ensure fairness for consumers and balance city and county rates. Review the regional governance models recommended in the report of the task force that was under current law, our law that passed in 2023. The work group is required to hire independent consultants to facilitate their tasks. And the governor must include an appropriation of $500,000 for hiring the independent consultants.
So, Kristen, I guess that would mean that should the subcommittee recommend this, then we have to make a request to appropriations. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
The bill requires the work group to consult with the Office of the Attorney General in developing the report. The amendment language would also require the work group to consult with MDE. And a report issued by the work group may not consider or make recommendations related to a privately operated regional water governance model. And we have received letters from both the Baltimore City and Baltimore County delegation in support of the amended bill.
Okay, Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I really appreciate the amendments. Thank you so much. I just wanted to ask, I think the amendment that was requested by the advocates for the privatization was go back down.
Yeah, I
What was-
gotcha. I'm sorry.
Yeah. What was privately operated or managed? And I'm just curious what the difference is there and why it was done the way it is here.
Honestly, Delegate, I can't comment on the specific language. This was language that was requested by the Baltimore City delegation.
Okay. Thank you.
Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know how hard you and others have worked on this, and how really important this is. So I'm wondering if you can just sort of enlighten us, what would happen if we didn't pass this bill?
If we didn't pass the bill, then there's always the possibility of trying to pass it again next year. But I think for all intents and purposes that the extensive discussions that have taken place involving Baltimore County, Baltimore City representatives, plus representatives from other jurisdictions in Central Maryland about a possible new governance model would stop. There would be one set of the task force recommendations related to short-term improvements of the existing model that's in place. But I think it's safe to say that the discussions concerning potentially, no guarantee, but potentially, making a recommendation for having some sort of regional governance model they certainly would come to a halt, and they would probably only resume if we passed a bill next year, along these lines.
So thank you. So would I be correct in saying, in light of all of the challenges that we saw, we need this bill in order to move forward? Would that be a correct
Yes,
statement?
I would say that's correct. And
Great, thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Delegate Otto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My biggest concern is the $500,000 appropriation. That can't the two jurisdictions fund themselves in doing this?
Well, I
think it's a appropriate subject, but I don't understand why all the taxpayers of Maryland have to do this.
Sure. I'll give an answer then. I know Jen Aosa from Baltimore County is on the call, so I'll ask her to chime in as well. But I know that the task force, one of the recommendations was seeking resources from the state for, for hiring independent consultants with respect to some of the particular issues where the feeling was neither Baltimore City or Baltimore County had the legal expertise to address them. And so that was that while the dollar amount was not in the actual recommendation, the request for state assistance with the hiring of consultants on these issues was made. And Jen, if you wouldn't mind adding to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Jen Aosa. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for Baltimore County. Delegate Stein is absolutely correct in that it was discussed at last year's task force that the legal divisions within the city and the county they don't have the authority to offer advice on a new sort of regional approach. And so at the very least, we would need outside legal assistance to help provide advice relative to some of the legal ramifications of, shifting debt or other things that might have to happen for a regional governance model to be established. The second thing is that because equity and the equity implications of potentially regionalizing the operation and maintenance and the workforce for a shared governance model, we felt like resources need to be brought to bringing in outside expertise. And then finally, to Delegate Otto's point about all of the state taxpayers, I would say that 2 years ago, when the challenges really came to light regarding some of the operational and maintenance issues at the two wastewater treatment facilities that are part of this network, those are the two largest wastewater treatment facilities in the entire state of Maryland. And Maryland, as part of its Bay restoration strategy, is heavily reliant on those two facilities operating at the limits of their technical capacity. And unfortunately, I think we saw that was not happening. And so in terms of Bay restoration and cleanup, these are these two single largest point sources in the state of Maryland.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Foley?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So isn't it correct that that's a one-time expenditure? That's not an ongoing cost. It's a
That's
one-time
correct.
expenditure to get the task force moving. And I don't know whether you have this information or maybe Jen has this information, but, we have had some issues here, with the impetus for this work group or the issues that arose in the past few years. And there is a cost associated with fixing those. Isn't that correct? And those costs are, I assume, are borne by more than just, Baltimore City, for example. And the failures of the system, I also assume, have an effect on, the bays and the watershed in general. Isn't that correct?
I would certainly say so. Jen, do you want to add to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Foley, I believe you're absolutely correct. I think one of the things that this extended work group would look at is what exactly it will cost to make sure that the facilities are operational. And one of the equity considerations is how will that be borne by the ratepayers. This system serves about 1.8 million residents in the greater Baltimore metropolitan region. So that is definitely the city of Baltimore and Baltimore County, but also portions of Carroll, Hartford, Howard, and Anne Arundel as well.
Okay, Delegate Otto.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the 500,000, I assume that's just an arbitrary figure. It was pulled out of the air. It would cover all the bases. You say it went to appropriations. They felt that was fine. And
well, this hasn't been requested. Approval from appropriations hasn't been requested yet because, that would only be that request would be officially made if the subcommittee approved the bill as amended. The 500,000, I mean, since worked with a number of different folks in drafting this bill. This was the best estimate from a number of representatives who served on the task force as to what it would cost. It is one-time appropriation. It would be for fiscal year 2026. But yeah, I can't say that there has been any sort of advance, request for proposals from the city or, made by the city or county government for the type of expertise that we made. And that's how we came up with the $500,000.
Could we put that to, well, let's say 250?
Well, Delegate, I think the higher number was the estimate, and potentially we certainly could say appropriation of up to 500,000. But I think, and Jen, again, I've asked you to chime in about sort of the thoughts about the amount that's being requested.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think your explanation is spot on. I will say that last year's task force was largely the costs for that were largely borne by the city and the county. A previous study of some of the challenges was also borne by the city and county. So we don't estimate that this will be the full cost. We do estimate that will help us get the outside expertise that the city nor the county can provide. So as I mentioned, the legal advice and the equity assessment. Otherwise, the city and the county will be responsible for staffing this work group and for other costs that come from the work group operating over the next few years.
Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there's just a little bit of a contradiction just now in that $500,000 is an amount, and Chairman, you said up to 500,000, and then the representative from Baltimore said, well, 500,000 is not going to be enough. So somewhere on the way here, I'm a little confused, and I agree with Delegate Love. I understand it's important to get this through. You talk about 1.8 million people. I can't do the math as fast as I used to in my head, but 500,000, that's a 30 cents or something, maybe 34 cents. That's why I see where Delegate Otto's coming from to try to get the number down, but like I say, we have 500,000 here, up to 500,000, and 500,000 is not enough.
Yeah, I will say I should probably withdraw my suggestion to say up to $500,000 because I think, again, from discussions with the different for representatives of the different local governments, $500,000 was the estimate. So I would request that we keep it at $500,000. But I think the thought was for specialized outside counsel as well as experts in equity analysis. That's what the estimate was for the cost. There will certainly be, as there were for the original task force, which met extensively this past year, there will be some staffing costs associated for the city and the county, that for which this legislation is not asking for any reimbursement, but we're talking about really the specialized outside assistance that neither the city or the county has in-house.
Move the
Okay.
amendments, Mr. Chair.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion or question about the amendments? Okay, all those in favor of the amendment say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the bill as amended. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second? Okay. All those in favor of the bill as amended, say aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
Nay.
Okay, I heard 2 nays. Unless I'm wrong on that, the bill as amended passes. Thank you for everyone's discussion. So the next step will be to get appropriations approval for the $500,000 figure that's in the bill. And then if appropriations approves, then it'll go to the full committee. So thank you, everyone. Okay, the next bill is Senate Bill 835, which we did hear today. And I do want to start off by saying that, since we heard it today and there is a difference between SB 835 and the cross-file, which we've approved, House Bill 992. If anyone wants to hold this, feel free to request it. But having said that, let's discuss where we are with SB 835 and how it differs from House Bill 992. So, Kristen, if I could ask you to do that.
So the bill, Senate Bill 835 requires a local health department or county government to which the MDE has delegated authority to administer a well and septic program to submit a schedule of review times for well and septic program permits to MDE for approval by December 1st, 2024. And then beginning 3 months after the schedule is approved by MDE and every 3 months thereafter, the local health department or county government must submit well and septic program permit data to MDE for review. So to that point, the bills have identical language. The difference is that the Senate added language that would require MDE in consultation with specified entities, including the Department of Information Technology, to study and make recommendations on modernizing information technology systems to connect local health departments, environmental programs, local governments, and MDE in relation to well and septic program permits. And then there's related reporting requirements. So that's where the bills differ.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry.
I didn't know, did you want me to bring up the bill?
Sure, why don't you bring up the bill? And at the hearing today, I did ask Les Knapp of MDE to comment on sort of some of the underlying, sort of the related issues that led to the additional language that's in SB 835. And I think that Les addressed sort of the issues that this additional language has, is meant to address. But Les, can I ask you to sort of, review the issues?
Sure.
And then Delegate Morgan, I'll get to your question.
So the issue here was this language was proposed in the Senate through the Maryland Association of County Health Officers and the Conference of Local Environmental Health Directors, but I think mainly MACHO, the health officers. And their understanding was that they wanted to make sure this proposed study that has been under discussion for years was moving forward. And significant effort over the last 2 years, MDE has proposed and gotten this into the pipeline for DO-IT to make this a real IT project. As the fiscal note reflects, this is about a $3.4 million project. DO-IT has approved the initial roughly $900,000 to do this needs assessment, which would encapsulate this study language with all but one part of it. I've spoken with MACHO just prior to the bill hearing. I spoke with Senator Hester prior to the bill hearing, and as I think was noted, they are okay with this being removed. We can provide you within a day or by Friday written confirmation from the secretary herself that this is indeed the case. Now, DO-IT does have to make a final decision vote on the total project. So while this needs assessment will move forward, we're still waiting to hear whether the remaining 3.3 million will be approved to make the complete project a reality. But usually once they approve money for the needs assessment, typically they're going to approve the whole project because they're putting $900,000 on the table. It would have, and they're not going to walk away from that.
Okay. And did you say you had a conversation with the bill sponsor as well?
I did. She was comfortable. Senator Hester and her assistant who presented the bill were both comfortable supporting the removal of this language now.
So they'd be comfortable removing that language so that it would conform with the way we passed HB 992?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you. Delegate Morgan.
Too bad, I'm not fast enough on the button. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Les, let me ask this question. I was talking to our health officers and they were happy with the Senate amendment, but you're saying the Senate amendment will probably go away so this bill would conform more to the House, correct?
Correct. And
Go ahead.
the reason being is that we're already working to do that study that they asked to be in the amendment, and it's already in the do it process. So in July, assuming the budget committees don't take the 900,000 out, which they haven't yet, we will be able to do this, and thus this is duplicative and unnecessary language. And they've agreed with that, and we're going to provide that to them in writing, and we can provide it to you in writing from Secretary McElwain in a formal letter.
Will the fiscal note remain the same?
So if the language is not taken out, it does put an additional fiscal note of roughly $250,000 on us. If it is taken out, the fiscal note will be eliminated because money is coming through for us to do this study already.
So the money's already pre-programmed into the budget. So it's not really well, it is a $3 million hit. The money's already in the budget.
For the study, which is there's 900,000 programmed into the budget to do this study and some more. It's not just this narrow piece, but that's included in that 900,000. So yes, the study is covered, it is paid for, and we will begin doing it with bringing everybody to the table that is listed in this amendment on July 1st, once the money's unencumbered.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions about the bill and the language that had been, as it came over from the Senate, that is in SB 835, but it sounds like everyone's on board with potentially removing. I do want to say if again, if anyone wants to hold this, that's fine. If no one wants to hold it, I would make a motion to conform SB 835 to the way we pass HB 992, which is basically to take out the language we've just been talking about. But again, I don't want to rush this if anyone wants.
I second that, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right. So any discussions about the motion to conform SB 835 to House Bill 992? All right. All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, the bill as amended. Is there a motion? Well, I'll move it. I'll move the bill as amended. Is there a second? Okay. All those in favor of the bill as amended, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, bill as amended passes. Thank you. And thank you, Les. Okay, so at this point, we have two bills just for discussion only. House Bill 1279, House Bill 830. I think we'll start with House Bill 1279, Maryland Building Performance Standards. And so, Kristen, if you could bring up that bill and do an overview of the changes. And I'd ask the bill sponsor, Delegate Boafo, if he would invite an advocate to help with the presentation, answer questions. So did I see, Jamie, did I see you on the call? Or is there someone else who wants to represent?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. So if you want to be sort of the designated advocate, that would be great. So Kristen, if you could start with the review. And again, just for review, answer any questions that folks might have about the bill, but we're not going to actually consider any motions on the bill, and certainly for HB 830. But so Kristen, why don't you take things away?
All righty. So I scrolled to, I guess I'm on page 5. And so subsection B is requiring the Department of Labor as part of the Maryland Building Performance Standards to include a requirement that new buildings and significant improvements of buildings and structures meet all water and space heating demands of the building or structure without the use of fossil fuels. For buildings that receive a waiver under the bill, there would need to be an electric ready standard for those buildings. A requirement would also need to be included that new buildings be solar ready if the building will have 20,000 square feet or more of continuous roof space, excluding the parking area, and will be 20 stories or less in height above grade plane. The standards also need to include a requirement that new buildings meet electric vehicle charging infrastructure requirements, including for new 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhouses, that they would have 1 EV capable or EV ready space per dwelling unit. For residential buildings of less than 4 stories, with 3 or more dwelling units would need to have EV capable, EV ready spaces for 40% of the dwelling units or parking spaces. And so then there's other requirements for EV. So for a building permit application that's submitted and received by a local jurisdiction after October 1st, 2026, must meet the requirements. So these requirements that are being established in the performance standards would need to be met on permit applications being submitted after October 1st, 2026. There are waiver provisions included in the bill. A waiver could be granted for the electric ready requirements for emergency backup power systems for new buildings and new buildings, significant improvements and additions specifically designated for occupancy by a commercial food establishment, a laboratory, a laundromat, a hospital, or crematorium. Waivers must be limited to building systems in areas that cannot feasibly use energy generated from a source other than fossil fuels. And financial considerations would not be a sufficient basis for determining feasibility. For buildings that are granted a waiver under the bill, they must seek to minimize emissions from its fossil fuel use, maximize health, safety, and fire protection, and be required to comply with electric ready standards. Adopted, I forgot what this one would be. Well, I could go back to that if needed, but it adopted under early provisions of the bill. And to ensure a waiver granted under the bill is still necessary, it must be reviewed each time the standards are modified and by the local jurisdiction that granted the waiver each time the local jurisdiction modifies its local amendments. Regulations adopted under the bill may authorize a local jurisdiction to waive the solar ready requirements on a specific finding that incident solar radiation at the building site is less than 75% of incident solar radiation at an open site, or shadow studies indicate that 25% of a building's roof area will be in shadow. There is language indicating that a local jurisdiction may adopt well, it just says that it may not be construed to prohibit a local jurisdiction from prohibiting the use of fossil fuels in buildings or adopting energy conservation and solar energy requirements for buildings that are more stringent than the requirements established under the bill. The next section applies to a new construction of a commercial or residential building with a gross floor area of 25,000 square feet or more, excluding the parking garage area. The department must establish energy conservation requirements for those buildings. And then there's a number of more specific requirements where the department must estimate site energy use intensity. I think some of those details, I don't have in-depth knowledge to explain those other than what they are stated on the page.
And Jamie, could you confirm a sponsor amendment would have taken out the energy use intensity provisions?
Yes, that's correct. This an energy use intensity portion was cut entirely.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we have those amendments?
They were submitted, and I know there was a reprint.
Okay. 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 Well, so then I guess this part, I can look and see if I have a reprint. I just didn't see it, but I might have it. And if you want me to take a minute to look.
Yeah, sure. Why don't you
Hold
take
on.
a minute to look? And while you're checking, Kristen, I see Delegate Foley has her hand up. So go ahead, Delegate Foley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. While she's looking, I have a couple of questions on the earlier part of the bill. Maybe Jamie can answer them because Kristen is wonderful, but I'm not sure she can do everything while she's looking for the bill. If that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Sure, of course.
So at the beginning of the bill, it talked about making making an alternative being making buildings electric ready and solar ready. And my question about that is, does that apply to new buildings, just new buildings, or also buildings with substantial improvement?
Jamie,
Yeah, so the provisions of the bill apply to buildings that are new and buildings with improvement over 50% of the value of the building, and the solar. Yeah.
Okay, so all of those things apply to the substantial improvement. It's substantially improved buildings or new buildings. And then my second question, if I may, Mr. Chair, is
sure.
There's a thing about there's a provision about 40% that there should be EV ready parking for 40% of the dwelling units or parking spaces. So how would that be determined? Like, you know, which one would you use? I mean, so if you had, for example, if you had limited parking, how would you, how would you apply that is what I'm trying to figure out. Do you understand my question? You look like you don't.
I don't.
Okay. So it says that it has to be, and I was doing this, making notes as she was going through it, but I think what I read was that there has to be 40% EV ready to the equivalent of 40% of the dwelling units or parking spaces.
And that's for residential
And
buildings
then it's just,
of less than 4 stories here on the top of page 6, starting line 1. Is that the provision?
Oh, yes, thank you. Oh, and it does say, it says whichever is less.
Yeah.
So that's, okay, I'm sorry. That's the answer to my question. And then finally, I didn't catch that the first time through. And then finally, the second, my final thing is, supposing there is no parking associated with the building.
well, then the lesser would be 40% of the parking, or the percentage of the parking units, which would be 0.
Well, but but if there's no parking available to the building, how can you provide capable EV ready spaces if you don't have any spaces? Like, so for example, we're trying to incentivize in Montgomery County, at least, that multifamily homes near transit or associated with transit not be required to have parking, for example, so that we want to encourage people to use transit. So there wouldn't be any parking. I mean, conceivably, there wouldn't be parking for some of these buildings. Yeah. So if there's no parking available, then does this apply or doesn't apply?
What the bill says is that it's 40% of dwelling units or parking spaces, whichever is less. So if there are no parking spaces, then that would be less, and you would have to, have 40% of 0, which would be 0, meaning it would not apply.
Okay. we might want to make that, well, I don't know if we want to make it clear, but it was a little confusing to me. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Delegate Tarassa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I guess I'm sorry I didn't focus in as much.
Delegate Tarassa, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. I know I was forgetting something. Okay, sorry I didn't focus in as much as I probably should have on this section before. I am curious how it relates to my bill on EV, for EV parking. I definitely am supportive of us doing EV parking, but we have been trying to get away from like EV capable and EV ready and actually require them in new construction. And so I don't know if that's a possibility for us to change that here.
Yes, and I apologize that we did not get a chance to touch base with you about your bill. It was flagged for us, but we designed this bill not knowing about your bill, and we would be happy to take amendments to this one that would get away from that language.
Yeah, and we also have language, I think, that may make it clear, it may make what Delegate Foley was asking about clearer as well. And I appreciate it. Yeah, we can talk after this, but I mean, I'm very much in support of us having requirements for EV parking. I just haven't focused in on the details and how it relates, but we would like to see actual EV charging available.
Okay. Okay. Great. Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So quickly, excuse me. This bill will not apply to schools, am I correct?
I believe it would apply to new schools. It's not any existing buildings, it's all just new buildings.
Okay, so if you're going to build a high school or let's say a middle school, and you have these requirements, would it then be incumbent upon the Board of Education of any school district to find enough suitable space to not only build the school, build the athletic fields, build everything around it, but also find a place to build solar to meet this requirement?
So the bill does not require buildings to have solar, it requires them to be solar ready, which just refers to how you use your roof space. You know, when you put your HVAC system on the roof, don't put it in the middle, put it on the side. So if you ever wanted to go solar, you would have that big open space in the middle. It doesn't require any buildings to have solar.
Okay, then thank you. Then the second question ties to where Delegate Foley and Delegate Tarassa were going regarding, let's just use, for example, the debate we had on the floor today relative to Delegate Stewart's housing bill. And you want to encourage a number of types of buildings to be built to take care of the housing shortage, and you're going to do them in an urban area. So how are you going to find the solar space in the urban area to hopefully achieve the governor's housing goals at the end of the day?
Again, the bill would not require any buildings to have solar. Just be solar ready on the roof space.
Even though if you're 8 stories tall and you're building apartments or townhouses or some type of a unit, I can't see feasibly how the top of that building would be able to provide enough solar power to even possibly for X number of units in an 8-story building.
And that's not saying that the solar on the roof, if it were built, would have to cover the full electricity use of the building. That's not what it's said in the bill or intended, just saying that when you're building a new building, you should build it in such a way that you could put solar on the roof easily should you choose to down the line. And that's all it says.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And Delegate and Jamie, I'm not 100% certain, but I believe in Climate Solutions Now Act from 2022, we did put in a provision that said that if a school wants to be net zero, it could seek a 5% premium in state funding for it. It's not exactly as being, net zero is close to all electric, not exactly the same, but perhaps, there could be some, some sinking of any requirement that future version of this bill apply to schools with that provision from a couple years ago. Okay, any further questions about this bill? And Kristen, I'm sorry, is the version you have up, is that with amendments?
Yes, you can see
Yeah,
the,
okay.
yeah, that all that language is taken out.
Okay, so that's language
The bill
requiring,
is just, that
Right.
first section.
right, okay. Delgado?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there's nothing in here to provide for bicycle parking? Is there provisions for that each unit or 10% of the units or 50% of the units would have to have bicycle security racks that they could park and be sure their bicycles aren't stolen?
No, this bill does not include that language. So it
Well,
sounds like a good amendment.
isn't that the ultimate zero emission other than our inhale and exhale? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, Kristen and Jamie, for reviewing the bill. Imagine we may see a version of this again next year. So stay tuned. And then last, we'll do a review of my House Bill 830, which would have established a electronics recycling or a more robust electronics recycling program than we have now. So Kristen, if you could pull that up and ask Kitty McElroy, who is the lead advocate, to also participate in the discussion.
I'm just, right now, I'll scroll down to the new provisions, because what the bill is doing, it's updating the state's approach to collecting, recycling, certain covered electronics. Under existing law, manufacturers of covered electronic devices have to pay a registration fee to MDE, and those manufacturers that implement a take-back program then can pay a reduced fee to MDE. And so what this is doing is it's taking out current law provisions dealing with the take-back program and implementing a new program where manufacturers would still be paying, I didn't scroll quite down, would still be paying a fee to MDE. There would also be a fee that consumers would be paying at the point of sale on covered electronic devices. And there's new definitions being added to the bill. There's a tier 1 covered electronic device, which a $10 fee would be paid, and then a tier 2 covered electronic device where a consumer would be paying $5 on that device. The fees that the consumer is paying would then go back, they'd be in an account, and MDE would then provide reimbursements to authorized recyclers and authorized collectors for the costs that are associated with those activities. And then there's also a covered electronic device advisory council being established under the bill. I don't know if you want to talk about the program, if you want to talk, you know, if you want your advocate to explain more about it, or if I need to.
Yeah,
go
maybe I'll ask Kitty
page.
to join. Oh, one thing, I'm not sure if I officially submitted the amendment, Kristen, but I had proposed something that would have changed, that would have left the actual consumer fee up to MDE to make sure that it was no more, no less than what was needed to implement the program. These were good estimates of what the cost would be, but we decided to take out the actual dollar amounts and defer to MDE. But Kitty, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was going to start with that point, Delegate Stein, so thank you. Sorry, I'm also a little under the weather, so I hope you can all hear me okay. My voice is gone a little bit. So just for background, I know that Kristen mentioned there is an existing state program. Just for clarification, the state is not managing individual collection and recycling programs for electronics. What the original law was set up to do back in 2005, and then it was amended a couple times, was to have manufacturers pay for a program. The funding was supposed to flow through MDE and then be distributed as grants to local jurisdictions to fund their programs. Unfortunately, that has never historically covered any of the programs. And since 2014, the majority of programs in the state have actually shut down. And like the majority of what they were taking in. So computer monitors and televisions, for example, are the majority of what the residential stream has seen that are now going to landfills because there just isn't funding for it. So just to reemphasize, this is establishing a consumer fee to actually pay for the consumer fee at point of purchase of a new electronic to pay for the electronics recycling that local government is currently doing. Or could expand what they're doing. And the manufacturer fees would continue to be in place. They're annual and they would just fund MDE's administration of the program. And I think that's it for now. There's definitely other things I could talk about, but I'll stop with that for now.
Okay, thank you. Any questions about this bill? Delegate Foley?
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm full of questions today.
That's fine.
Does this bill basically, can I say it this way, that this bill basically covers anything with a screen? Is that really what this is?
Kitty?
Yeah, so yes, I mean, absolutely. I think the way it's written right now, it actually would cover everything with a screen. The intention is to allow MDE to expand the definition as needed. Although who knows, Delegate Stein, if he does choose to bring it back next year, that could always be amended or narrowed. But the intention was to allow for this to cover pretty much all municipal electronics coming through local government programs. Right now, we tried to keep the scope pretty limited. So like televisions and computer monitors are in that tier 1 category. Those are the most expensive and most prevalent materials that are collected. Tier 2 is like, it says laptop, personal digital assistant, notebook reader, cell phone, a CPU of a computer, and then printer, scanners, and copiers. So those are kind of the lowest hanging fruit with what we see in municipal programs. And for background, I manage electronics recycling contracts. So I've been doing that for over a decade. So that's kind of where my experience comes into this. I'm here on behalf of Maryland Recycling Network. I probably should have started with that.
And there's something in the bill about white electronics.
So white goods are already defined under law and regulation. Although Dave's on, so maybe he could Dave Margich is on, maybe he could give a better explanation. Those are already defined and those are not electronics. So it's just specifying that those aren't included in this program. Although
they are or they are not included?
They are not, sorry.
They are not, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So my refrigerator with a screen on it, not that I have that, I think that's weird actually, but my refrigerator with a screen on it is not covered by this.
Right, and that generally would find its way to a scrap metal collection program within your same jurisdiction. Different collector, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, no, good question, Delegate Foley. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Kristen and Kitty, for reviewing House Bill 830. So with that, we are done with our agenda. We will, be meeting again probably soon. So certainly stay tuned. We do need to take up the bills relating to flood management grant programs and any other Senate bill that comes before the committee that goes to environment. Delegate Guyton, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering, I don't know if you know the answer for sure. We don't have a lot of time, but if there were bills that we had questions about before crossover, and in particular, I'm thinking about the dark skies lighting bill that Delegate Wilkins had that I had a lot of questions about, and some of the other colleagues here had questions about, and it sort of went away right before crossover. And I feel kind of responsible for that because she has since answered all those questions. Is there any possibility of bringing those back up at this point, or we just say, hey, sorry, next year you can bring it back?
Yeah, it's pretty much the latter. I mean, given
Okay.
we're not gonna yeah, so like House Bill 305, I realize that, you know, and Delegate Wilkins had made a lot of effort to answer the questions that came up in our last subcommittee meeting, but we won't be able to take that up and consider passing it before sine die, but, you know, certainly, hopefully early next session.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure. Okay, anything else? Okay, well, that ends the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening and see you all soon. Bye-bye.